Hey everyone, it's Billy Carson, aka Forbidden Knowledge. Today I want you to welcome a very good friend of mine, best-selling author Andrew Collins. He's a science and history writer who investigates advanced civilizations in prehistory. He's also the co-discoverer of a massive cave complex at the Giza Plateau, now known as the Collins Cave. The author of several books, including Origins of the Gods and Göbekli Tepe, Genesis of the Gods, he regularly appears on radio shows, podcasts, and TV series, including Ancient Aliens, The Unexplained with William Shatner, and Lost Worlds. He lives in England. Welcome to the show, my very good friend, Andrew Collins.
Looking at snakes, it seemed to be something similar was going on, certainly on a symbolic level. Mm-hmm. You had to be consumed by this snake. Even the pillar shrine itself seems to be a three-dimensional head of a snake. Rites were going on here where people were quite literally becoming possessed by a snake. They were delivering oracular communications, very similar to the oracle at Delphi. Right at the base are the stars surrounding something known as the galactic bulge. Now, the galactic bulge marks the center of our own Milky Way galaxy.
Boxes, I cannot fit in the boxes. Stop it. Quitting was never an option. Exhausted. This passion is never exhausted. And you cannot stop it. Nah, you cannot stop it. Quitting was never an option.
For the people that are following our accounts and just maybe seeing you for the first time, tell them a little bit about what got you into ancient civilizations and what got you looking into these ancient mysteries.
As I mentioned, my background, I suppose, really goes back to reading books by Eric von Daniken. I was also into UFOs, the paranormal, so-called Earth mysteries, the idea of megalithic structures, being on ley lines and, some kind of lost technology or geometry associated with them. I mean, and then it sort of gradually evolved from there, really. The interest in Egypt heightened. And then in the mid-1990s, I wrote my first proper book. I mean, I'd written several books earlier than those, but those were sort of books on what we call psychic questing, gallivanting off around the landscape, hunting artifacts and solving mysteries and whatever. But my first proper book was From the Ashes of Angels that came out in 1996. And basically what this did was to look at all of the myths and legends relating to these mythical beings that brought civilization to the ancient world. I mean, we're talking about the Watchers of the Book of Enoch, and obviously their offspring, the Nephilim. We're talking about the Anunnaki, of Mesopotamian tradition, and the way that they, were able to give the rudiments of civilization to the earliest city-states of Sumer and Akkad and the other civilizations, in places like Iraq, and basically came up with the idea that this was a memory of some kind of shamanic elite or prime movers behind the Neolithic revolution in southeastern Turkey at the end of the last ice age. And I suggested that, this is where you would find evidence of this high culture that very clearly had pre-existed this time and probably went back to the time of the last ice age, and that may well have been wiped out in a civilization, in a catastrophe. So that was basically it. Now, what I didn't realize as I was writing this book, which by the way, became an international bestseller, it was in the Times bestseller list, is that the first spades were going into the ground at Göbekli Tepe. I mean, somewhere I had no knowledge of whatsoever until the year 2000, when there was a huge spread on Göbekli in a German magazine. And of course, I was alerted to that. And I thought, well, there you go. There's your smoking gun of this sort of lost civilization, if you like. And obviously, when I looked at the T-pillars there, I thought this was so unusual, so strange that there was absolutely no comparison with anything that you might find in Egypt or Babylon or the Indus Valley or China or whatever. It seemed to be absolutely unique. And of course, we know that Göbekli Tepe goes back to 9,600 BC. So a couple of years later, in 2002, From the Ashes of Angels was published in Turkey. And 2 years later, I was asked to lecture on it in southeastern Turkey, basically saying that the Kurdish people were the sort of descendants of the founders of civilization, really. And during this time, I was given a driver and an interpreter to go to all of these sites, which I'd never been to before. I'd been to other parts of Turkey, but I'd not been to southeastern Turkey. So I went to Göbekli Tepe. I went to other sites like Haran in the area, the ancient astronomical tower there. And whilst I was at Haran, these kids came up to me and basically wanted to sell me this local tiny guidebook that was secondhand already. And so I looked at it and I gave them some money for it. And I turned to the back, and there was reference to this place called Karahan Tepe, which had only just been discovered. And there was a picture in there of a T-shaped pillar like the ones at Göbekli Tepe, but it had a snake crawling up the side of it. And it just looked really unusual. And I just thought, I've got to find this place. So 2 days later, I was back in the area in the Tek Mountains, which is where Karahan Tepe is located, a very remote part of Turkey, quite close to the Syrian border. And nobody seemed to know where this place was. I'd never heard of it. But finally, we talked to this guy in full Arab dress on a tractor, and he just sort of pointed in a certain direction. And we came to this farmhouse, and this little boy came out, talked to our interpreter, and he just pointed southwards to this hill, a limestone hill. And so we walked towards it. And as we got closer, you could see stone tools on the ground. Now, at first, there were only a few. But as you got closer and closer to the hill, there were more and more, until eventually around its base, there were thousands of them. And I've seen something similar at Göbekli Tepe. So I knew we were at the right place. I also knew that this site was clearly around 9,000 BC, something like that. So about 11,000 years old. But what I also saw on the ground were angled pieces of what considered to be porthole stones. And they looked like they'd come from some kind of medieval building, like a medieval Gothic building. I mean, they were so well done, and they were just lying about. But also, there were the heads of T-pillars just sticking up around everywhere. And it was quite clear that underneath this soil and rubble at the base and at the side of the hill was some kind of complex like Göbekli Tepe. So, this obviously enthralled me. And in fact, I became more interested in this site than Göbekli, in all honesty. So I would go back there year after year, exploring every cave, every hill, every valley, to try and understand the significance of the site, its astronomical alignments, and what was going on, what its relationship was, obviously, with Göbekli Tepe. I would go there on my own, but also go with Hugh Newman, and eventually J.J. Ainsworth. We'd go there to explore as well. And then in 2018, we visited the site, and the family said, that they were going to survey the site in readiness for excavations that would begin the following year, 2019. And I didn't go there in 2019, and then obviously we had the lockdowns. So I didn't really even think about it. And then in September 2021, they finally released what they had been discovering at Karahan Tepe for 3 years now. And when I saw this, I thought, oh my God. I mean, it was just this huge complex. I mean, you've been there, you've seen it. And I mean, I'm calling it almost like a lost civilization, a lost city of the Anunnaki now. I mean, it's quite a grand title, but I mean, it almost feels that way. And I actually think it could be more important than Göbekli Tepe itself, because what's going on at Karahan Tepe seems to be far deeper, far rawer, far more complex than what is happening at Göbekli, because what you see there are rock cut enclosures, literally cut out of the bedrock. You know, it's the earliest rock architecture anywhere in the world, certainly, you know, officially. And I mean, one of the enclosures, which is right behind you as we speak now, is what we call the Pillars Shrine. And this is cut vertically down into the bedrock, leaving in position 10 pillars that are slightly phallic in appearance, plus an 11th one that's sticking up, that looks very serpentine in nature. And on the wall, actually facing into the, or coming out of, I should say, the actual hill itself, is this enormous human head.
Yes.
You know, as much as 3 times the size of a normal human head. And it's on the end of a very long serpentine neck that's got like striations across it. And I mean, you know, it's clearly serpentine in nature. Even the archaeologists, you know, talk about it as being so. And, you know, it looks like it's literally coming out of the actual hill itself, and I don't think that this is a, you know, a coincidence or by accident. And I mean, when you look at this shrine, this is only one of 3 interconnected, you know, subsurface shrines. There is that it almost looks like the shape of a snake itself. In fact, I overlaid the head of a Anatolian meadow viper, which is a poisonous and indigenous species to the Teknik Mountains, actually on top of that, and it fitted perfectly. So what that shrine is a 3-dimensional representation of a snake head. And it's even possible that in an abstract form, the pillars coming out of the bedrock are actually the fangs of the snake itself. And, you know, in other words, they went to all of this trouble to create what appears to be, you know, a 3-dimensional head of an actual snake. And the only way that you would have got into it, and we do think that there was a roof on the top of it, is through a small porthole. And you have to virtually climb through it and slide down into it. So you're inside the shrine itself, which, if it is the head of a snake, why would you want to go inside the head of a snake? Why would you want to be in the mouth of the serpent itself? And I think the idea is that you're meant to be consumed by this creature, in the same way that we know that vultures were used to consume the flesh of dead bodies during the early Neolithic. I mean, the bodies basically would be put out on high places. The vultures would come down. They would consume the flesh, possibly take away the smaller of the bones. And then they would fly away. And because of which, it was seen that when the vultures ate the flesh, that they were taking in the soul, the spirit of a person that was then being taken away off to the afterlife. So the vulture itself became a symbol of what's known as a psychopomp in Greek myth, which is basically the soul carrier or the soul accompanier that takes and accompanies a soul into the next life. Well, looking at snakes, it seemed to be something similar was going on, certainly on a symbolic level. You had to be consumed by this snake to become at one with the snake. So what was this snake? Now, there are snakes everywhere at Karahan Tepe. They're crawling up the sides of pillars. They're on the sides of benches. They're carved into the bedrock itself in abstract form. And as I said, even the pillar shrine itself seems to be a 3-dimensional head of a snake. So, what I imagined was that rites were going on here where people were quite literally becoming possessed by a snake, and that they were delivering oracular communications very similar to the oracle at Delphi, where you had these female priestesses called Pythia, or the Oracle, that would sit on this tripod-shaped seat, and they would be intoxicated by the fumes that would come up from below from a dead serpent, a dead snake that was supposedly killed by Apollo. And what would happen is that they would become possessed by Apollo himself. But we're not talking about some shining sun god here. We're talking about Apollo as a snake, and Apollo would enter in them as a snake, and they would then give pronouncements that could decide the fate of kings, of kingdoms, and even the gods themselves. And I think that something similar was going on at Karahan Tepe. But then the question becomes, what was this snake? Was it something that was simply, in their minds, or was there a real entity out there somewhere that was associated, with a cosmic serpent? And the clue comes from the fact that these shrines at Karahan Tepe are aligned towards the solstices. My good friend, Hugh Newman and J.J. Ainsworth, they discovered this incredible alignment of the midwinter sun. A thin pierce ray of light will go in through the porthole stone of the pillar shrine and hit that big head on the winter solstice, just a few minutes after the sunrise. So we know that that's connected with the winter solstice. Well, the shrine next to it, the pit shrine, which has this huge, deep, hole in the middle of it for no apparent reason, that's aligned to sunset at the summer solstice, so 6 months later. And you could actually stand in this enclosure and look directly at the sun on this moment. But what's so interesting, I mean, these are incredible in their own right. I mean, these are arguably the oldest solstitial alignments in the world, certainly, again, officially. But if you waited for 2 hours until it got dark, you would behold an incredible wonder, because where exactly the sun has just set, the Milky Way would be seen to rise vertically up in the sky. Wow. And you would see this dark area between it, which is known as the Dark Rift, or the Cygnus Rift, which has been seen by many ancient cultures as the road or river into the sky world. And right at the base are the stars surrounding something known as the galactic bulge. Now, the galactic bulge marks the center of our own Milky Way galaxy. And if you look at the ring or band of the Milky Way, if you were able to see it in 360 degrees, the brightest part is the galactic bulge. In the past, it would have seemed almost like a sort of light bulb in the sky. And it was this that these people seem to focus on. And I began to realize that the snake that they were venerating was the Milky Way itself. And in many ancient cultures, the Milky Way is seen as a snake. It's in Mesopotamia, it's in Vedic tradition in India, it's in North America, it's in Mesoamerican tradition, the Maya particularly, it's in South American tradition. Everybody sees it as a cosmic snake. It's also there in Greek tradition, in Norse tradition, and it's known as the world encircling snake. And one of the best images that we have of this is in Norse tradition, where you see images of the world tree, Yggdrasil, the ash tree, and the upper branches are in the sky world, the middle branches are in the middle world, and the roots are in the lower world, or the underworld. And you have the landmass of the earth, and around that you have the oceans, which blend into what is beyond those three worlds, which is what's known as the cosmic ocean, or the primeval waters of chaos, out of which everything emerged in the first place. So this Milky Way serpent seems to have been what these people were venerating. And the head is the galactic bulge. And the open mouth is the dark rift itself.
Yeah.
And once you look at it and you realize this, it becomes difficult to unsee it, as it were.
That's
And
amazing.
this is what I think the people there at Karahan were venerating. They were venerating the Milky Way snake, the world encircling serpent, as some kind of cosmic deity. And I find this quite interesting because, you know, we know that this marks the center of our own Milky Way galaxy. And what we know that is there is a supermassive black hole, which the astronomers call Sagittarius A star. And Rupert Sheldrake, the great free thinker of our times, has actually proposed that black hole, that supermassive black hole, is an intelligent being. It has consciousness, and it sort of tends its flock in the sense of, you know, all of the matter within the galaxy itself is, for the most part, is spewed out by this supermassive black hole, they believe. So it's almost like tending its flock. It's like a localized form of God in a way.
Right. Yeah.
And I find that a very interesting concept. And is it possible, therefore, that these people at Karahan Tepe were somehow intuitively aware that there was some kind of higher intelligence associated with the center of our galaxy?
Yeah, that's just incredible. I mean, wow. You know, I obviously, you know, I've been there recently, just in September. We barely missed each other in September. I was there on a tour. Really my first time actually seeing Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe in person. And, you know, pictures on the internet and Google and in books just can't do it any justice. You have to be there to see the magnificence of this site. And Karahan Tepe, when I turned that corner and I saw that face, it just blew me away. I've seen it before. I've seen you podcasts to talk about it, and Hugh Newman and JJ, but to see it in person, it's still like, it's mesmerizing. It's just an incredible thing. And one of the things I'm still trying to figure out, you know, they try to say that the Neolithic people built this site. Is that your point of view as well?
Well, I mean, yes, absolutely, but it's not that simple, really, because I think that there was a cosmopolitan society that were behind this high culture, this post Ice Age civilization, which the archaeologists, by the way, want to tell us is called Tash Tepala, which means the stony hills or the stone mounds, and the stone being because they use stone, you know, to carving stone to create these enclosures, and the hills actually are the occupational mounds in which all of these structures can be found, and which are almost like a layer cake of human activity. I mean, there's hundreds of them in southeastern Turkey. And so, you know, who are the Tash Tepala? Well, I think that it was local people, indigenous peoples to southeastern Turkey at the time. I think it was people that came down from the mountains, the so-called Zazian peoples that existed then. Plus, I think that there were peoples coming in from Western Turkey, from the Aegean, who were, you know, using seafaring vessels to reach Cyprus to create and sustain whole, you know, settlements and communities there. So they had these, you know, seafaring capabilities. So I think they came into play. Plus, the X factor, if you like, are the people coming down from the north. They are the prime movers, the shamanic elite that we're talking about. And I think that they start their journey as far east as Siberia and Mongolia.
Wow.
And they use the Russian or the Eurasian steppe to reach the area just by the Caucasus Mountains, and then they come down into Anatolia. Others, I think, probably would have come via the Zagros Mountains coming in from the east. And they established themselves there probably around 10,000 to 10,500 BC, at a time which we know there was incredible cataclysms taking place in the world, the so-called Younger Dryas event, is a 1,200-year mini ice age that gripped the northern hemisphere from around 10,800 BC down to 9,600 BC. And of course, 9,600 BC is when Göbekli Tepe was created. And of course, it's the time that Plato tells us that Atlantis was destroyed in one night of earthquake and floods. I mean, I don't think any of this is coincidence. It's quite clear that that date marked the ending of this period and a chance for the world to go back to normal, if you like. And we also know that the beginning of this Younger Dryas event started with some kind of comet impact, probably a fragment of a comet going around the sun, comes out of the sun, starts to break up, goes into the Earth's atmosphere, breaks up even further into hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces that burn up, creating these air blasts that actually set alight large swathes of biomass in the northern hemisphere, from North America all the way across to the Middle East. In fact, we know that the closest one to Göbekli Tepe was about 150 miles away, at a site called Abu Huraya, which is on the Euphrates. So, all of this was going on. So peoples were coming down into Anatolia and settling. We also know that peoples from Siberia and Mongolia were reaching the area of Anatolia as early as 11,000 BC, and they were going there regularly. This is brand new material, not even published in the journals yet. I mean, I know this for a fact. Watch out for this information. It's going to be really, really important, because it's going to show that there was a direct relationship between Siberia, Mongolia, and Anatolia at this time. But of course, as I said, the Younger Dryas event gets in the way of everything. People have to migrate south because they want to go to the warmer climate. So they end up in places like Anatolia. They probably go down into the Levant, the areas of Syria and Lebanon, Palestine, Israel, Jordan, probably as far south as Egypt as well. But what's happening in the area of southeastern Turkey, particularly the region of Şanlıurfa, which obviously is focused around the city of the same name, is that they are creating these incredible structures with these T-shaped pillars, not just a few of them. Each of these sites, of which we now know that there's at least 12 Taş Tepe sites, have dozens and dozens and dozens of these T-shaped pillars that occupy the areas of these enclosures. So it's not just Göbekli, it's not just Karahan. I mean, there's Sayburç, for instance, which is a few miles to the west of Şanlıurfa. We know that Şanlıurfa itself had a huge complex itself, Taş Tepe 1. And there are other sites like Sefer Tepe, which is about 25 miles to the northeast of Karahan Tepe. And the archaeologists are working on all of these sites, and they're uncovering more and more and more of these T-pillars. Why would you want to do this? And, I mean, the answer is, I think, that people were living in a state of fear. I mean, there's a visionary writer by the name of Barbara Hand Clone. She wrote a book called Catastrophobia, great book a few years ago. And the name of the book is basically what she said was the state of mind of the people at the end of the Younger Dryas people. They were still in a state of catastrophobia. In other words, they feared every time a comet came into the sky, they feared that more catastrophes would happen. And what I think happened at this point is that these prime movers, this shamanic elite, these mythical beings that we remember under terms like Anunnaki and the Watchers and the Immortals, which is the term that's used in Iranian tradition. They're called the Giants in Armenian tradition. I mean, they all seem to refer to the same type of people, that they come into the midst of these other people who are referred to in the text as the mortals, basically. And these people are seen as shining beings. They're possibly incredibly tall. They have skin that seems to glow, eyes that seem to glow. Their faces are described as looking like vipers or snakes. And they come in and they take over the show. I mean, basically, they are shamans. They are probably priests. They are probably astronomers. And And the people say to them, please, can you help us? And they say, look, no problem at all. We can sort it all out. We can make sure that no further catastrophes take place. We have connections with these supernatural creatures, these tricksters that come into the sky that cause this type of catastrophe. But for us to do this, you've got to help us.
Right.
And that means creating these enclosures. And they've got to be done in a certain style. They've got to be orientated in a certain way. They've got to have acoustic properties. And we will ensure that they act as easy access into the sky world. And we will make sure that no further problems occur. But you must stick to what we say.
Yeah.
So for the next 1,500 years, these people create exactly the same style of buildings, exactly the same, and all in one region. They don't seem to go outside the region. Yes, there are some traits of the Taş Tepe are found in central Turkey, in eastern Turkey, in Syria, for instance. But the actual T-pillars, as far as we're aware, were only manufactured and erected in the area of the Şanlıurfa province and the edges of that. And it's, I mean, this is 1,500 years. This is the amount of time that we've been creating churches in the same style, creating an altar in the east with a cross on it and, images of Jesus and whatever. I mean, why do we do that? Why do we create churches, for instance, or mosques or synagogues or whatever? Why do we stick to the same style? And, why don't we turn them around and get them to face the south or the east or the west or whatever? And the answer is, because we fear that something bad would happen, because we're superstitious. And I think that that's exactly what was happening with the Taş Tepe people. They believed they had to do this. And this is the only explanation, because coming back to your original question, is that, these people were said to be hunter-gatherers. Yeah, they were. Now, the hunter-gatherers, what are hunter-gatherers? They're people that basically just go around foraging, following the herds, maybe on a 4-year circuit with their family, maybe a close social group, right? That's all they needed to do in their life. So why would they suddenly want to all cluster together in an urban environments and spend all of their time creating these enclosures? It doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
Unless there is a fear that if they don't do it, something bad will happen again. And that something bad is catastrophes, cataclysms. And I think that this is what happened for 1,500 years. They created these monuments, these enclosures, and then eventually they thought, why are we doing this? Actually, could somebody remind me why we're doing these? And they said, oh yeah, it was a cataclysm. Yeah, but wasn't that 1,500 or 2,000 years ago, or however they would have, referred to it? And they said, well, maybe we don't need to do these anymore. And then suddenly it just stops. So they then start moving into other parts of the ancient world in what's known as the Neolithic Revolution. And of course, that spreads into Europe, goes into the Indus Valley, it goes into China and, everywhere. Obviously, it spreads outwards. And here's the interesting point. Obviously, we share this interest in the Anunnaki. Who actually were the Anunnaki? Now, I obviously respect the fact that some people, will see them as space beings that came down here, a la, Zecharia Sitchin and his work. But the root of them is the Anuna. The Anuna is the original name for the Anunnaki. And Anuna was a Sumerian word which can be broken down, and it means basically possessed of the sky, or possessive of the sky if it's broken down. Now, you can basically, shorten that to sky people if you want. So who were the sky people? Now, again, obviously some people may wish to see this as further evidence that they came down from the sky. My own view is that these people had knowledge of the sky, knowledge of astronomy, knowledge of cosmology, knowledge of the cycles of the heavens, and obviously knowledge of how to deal with the sky creatures, these tricksters. And the tricksters were basically animals, like the coyote in North American tradition, whereas its counterpart at Göbekli Tepe is the fox. The fox is a universal symbol of a trickster in the Eurasian continent, and the fox's tail is a universal symbol of a comet or a comet's tail.
Okay.
I mean, believe it or not, even to this day in heraldry, the sign for a comet is a fox's tail. I mean, they're synonymous with each other. If you can go all the way to China, and you can see the links between a canine and a canine tail and comets, in very old illustrations, for instance. And of course, what we have on the stones at Göbekli Tepe is one's got a belt and a buckle that's got this 3-pronged thing on a circle that I identified in my book Göbekli Tepe: Genesis of the Gods in 2014 as a comet, a comet sticking up. I mean, just like it would be if the sun was just below the horizon and it was above it, and the 3 tails would be sticking vertically upwards. And just directly below this is a fox's pelt loincloth. And this also is a symbol of comets. In Mayan tradition, for instance, when comets came into the sky, people would be, would fear that a catastrophe was going to take place. And the Mayan priests would wear a fox pelt loincloth and do the rites and appease this, this creature in the sky to ensure that it didn't create a catastrophe. So in other words, these guys, these T-pillars, these huge T-pillars, right, which are at the center of enclosure D at Göbekli, are comet shamans. Ultimately, they are there to prevent these comets from causing, the problems in the sky. And I think that they would have had knowledge of comets as well. I mean, if they had all this knowledge of astronomy, they would know that certain comets were on short orbits, like, for instance, Halley's Comet, which is on an orbit of 76 years. I think it's 76. So, it wouldn't take them very long, a few generations, to work out that this one keeps coming back, for instance.
Right.
So, they could actually impress a community by saying, look, we are people of our word, because next year there will be a comet come into the sky and it will have 3 tails. And, you will know our word is true. And of course, suddenly it comes in and says, oh my God, these people, have this incredible foreknowledge. They can predict. And I think this is the way that they got them. And now Klaus Schmidt was the discoverer of Göbekli Tepe in 1994. I knew him. We had lots of conversations. And basically he wrote in his book, Göbekli Tepe, came out in 2012, incredible book, if you can get hold of it, that in his opinion, the T-pillars at Göbekli Tepe, particularly the central ones, which are much bigger, and the other ones are like the smaller ones, all facing towards the bigger ones, that he said that they represented the ancestors of the builders of Göbekli Tepe, and that they were the Anunnaki. That's the word he used. And what he cited is the fact that Göbekli itself was the home of the Anunnaki, or the Anunnaki. He talks about the so-called Duku Mount. The Duku Mount is it's been identified as an occupational mound, very much like Göbekli Tepe. I mean, there are academic papers saying this. I mean, I quote them in my books. And he said that the mountain on which the Duku Mound, which is where the Anunnaki lived, was called Harsag. And he said that was, that area of Göbekli Tepe. That was basically the mountain on which, Göbekli Tepe was created. Now, obviously, he was writing this. He didn't know about Karahan. He didn't know about all these other sites necessarily. So I don't necessarily think you can pin it down to one mountain or one place. I think, you're dealing with a whole area now. And again, I go into this in the new book, because what the Mesopotamians tell us is that their origins and their gods came either from the north or from the northeast. And of course, if you're in Iraq and you're going towards the north, or you're going to the northeast, you'll hit the mountains. If you go north, you'll hit the Taurus Mountains. If you go to the northeast, you'll hit the Zagros Mountains. And they said it was beyond that the gods lived. Basically, in other words, the Anunnaki or the Anunna. I mean, yeah, they clearly say it. They actually give you a route of how to get there, and they said that you must cross the Kaaba harbour, which is a term for an area that's still there today in northern Syria. And of course, you do have to cross the Kaaba, what's known as the Kaaba Triangle, in archaeological terms, to reach the edge of the Taurus Mountains, and of course, all the Tash Tapala sites. So I think that all of this is correct. I think that, you know, these mythical beings were the divine ancestors of the people that created Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe.
Wow, amazing. And so, well, you definitely answered the question. I'm trying to figure out the connection between these sites and Adam and Eve.
Okay, yep, we can do that.
Yeah.
Now, Garden of Eden was a mythical place, but it was also a geographical location as well. I mean, to start off with, it was said that here the 4 rivers of paradise take their rise. Now, they can be identified fairly easily as the Euphrates, the Tigris, the Arxis, which runs east and west. It runs east into the Caspian Sea. And the 4th one is the Greater Zarb, been recognized as one of the 4 rivers of paradise for at least a couple of thousand years. And all of these rivers take their rise in eastern Turkey, all of them. So from a geographical perspective, you know, we can pin it down quite easily. There are certain locations within this region that claim to be Eden. For instance, Lake Van, huge inland sea on the eastern edge of Turkey. It's said that the Garden of Eden lays beneath that, where it's been since the flood of Noah, you know, where it got drowned. There is an Armenian monastery, or the ruins of. I went there as part of the journey for my book, Göbekli Tepe, Genesis of the Gods. This claimed to have a tree that was grown from a branch of the tree of life from the terrestrial paradise, the Garden of Eden. I went there. I actually brought back pieces of this tree. I mean, it's now dead. I should point that out. But the most important story to do with the location of Eden is in the area of Şanlıurfa, just 10 miles away from Göbekli Tepe and probably about 25 away from Karahan Tepe. Because here you have traditions that this is the place where God made Adam, or the soul of Adam, placed him down on the earth, created his body out of the red earth, which is found locally.
Yeah.
Obviously, then made Eve from the rib. They live in the terrestrial paradise, all very happy, until a snake or serpent comes along, which has 2 arms and 2 legs. Let's point this out. And it says, you know, why don't you eat of that tree over there, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? And so, you know, obviously they take, you know, according to all of the medieval Christian art, a nice rosy red apple and eat it. And they realize they're naked, they've lost their innocence, and God sees what's going on and says, you know, get out, you know, before you eat of the other tree, the tree of life, and live forever. And, you know, who told you to eat of this tree? And they said, oh, him, the serpent, basically. And so God turns around to the serpent and says, you know, you've been really naughty, really wicked. So forever you will slide along on the ground. I'm going to take away your arms and your legs. It's a really interesting statement because, you know, is it possible that this snake was some kind of shaman or a snake shaman in the first place?
Yes.
You know, that was giving them information. But the other important point here is that the word, and don't ask me to I can't remember at the moment, the Hebrew word for fruit, as in the fruit, the forbidden fruit, is the same word as seed and can mean a stalk of wheat or a seed of wheat. Okay. And that's very, very important for two reasons. Firstly, in certain traditions, the forbidden fruit is a stalk of wheat, particularly in Islamic mysticism. And secondly, the second part of the story of this Adam and Eve, because once they've been thrown out of the Garden of Eden, they go eastwards onto the Haran plain. And the Haran plain is a really fertile area. It's the center point for all of the different Tash Templar sites that surround it, basically. And you obviously have the ancient city of Haran, right in the middle of it. But it said that Adam and Eve go out onto the Haran plain and they have to till the land. That's obviously what the book of Genesis tells us. And for the first few years, so Adam then turns to Eve, apparently. This is according to the legend. This is told by people to this day in Shanlurfa. I heard this from actually somebody who came up to us in Shanlurfa Archaeological Museum whilst we were actually in the reproduction of Enclosure D at Göbekli Tepe. And this woman came up and started talking to us about these legends to do with Adam and also Abraham. And according to the story, is that Adam turns to Eve and says, "What are we going to grow?" And she says, "Oh, what about this I've just happened to have in my hand that I brought out of heaven, and it's a stalk of wheat." So they plant this wheat, and for the first few years, they get a very low yield, and quite clearly, that they haven't got enough food, so they're getting weaker. And then a bull comes along, and this bull they realise that they can use to plough the land. They can plant things more quickly or quicker. And then the yield is greater. And to give thanks to the bull, they kiss it on the forehead and do so every year afterwards. So you say to yourself, well, what the hell is that all about? Well, the bull is a metaphor. It's the earth itself. I mean, and I didn't know this until a few years ago, but Kurdish people and obviously other peoples in Turkey, but particularly Kurds, believe that the earth itself is a bull, and that the horns of the bull hold up the heavens.
Wow!
And that when the bull moves or shifts, you have earthquakes, you have volcanoes, you have thunderstorms. That's what they believe. I mean, I heard this from our guide, our tour guide, a few years back, and I said, is this well known? He said, yeah, no, everybody believes it. And I obviously then checked it out, and sure enough, lots of people do believe this. Anyway, so in other words, the bull in the story of Adam and Eve is a metaphor for the earth itself, giving thanks to the earth, like harvest ceremonies, I suppose. So the question then becomes, what or who is this snake, the snake of Eden? And I think that it is a memory, an abstract memory of the communications that were going on at places, particularly like Karahan Tepe, communicating with the Milky Way serpent, and particularly its head, which of course was the galactic bulge, which corresponds, as I've said, to the center of our own galaxy, and a possible intelligent being in the form of the supermassive black hole that is like a localized form of God. And that's what I think is going on. That's what I've written in the book. But it doesn't end there, because I think a lot of these ideas are filtered through places like Haran and also Shanlurfa, become part of the doctrine of the so-called Chaldeans or the Sabians. They are the astronomer priests of places like Haran and Shanlurfa. And what emerges out of this is Orphite Gnosticism, where the snake is seen as the representative, the sun, S-O-N, of this higher intelligence that's beyond our own physical universe, that is almost like some kind of invisible sun that exists, as I say, beyond that in a primeval ocean or primeval world, some supernal realm that exists beyond that. And they venerated that snake, and would actually, their rites would not only involve physical snakes, but also they would invite this snake, which was called the Good Serpent, It has other terms as well. Agatha demon, the good spirit. They would actually allow it to enter inside them. And I think that it was the same as the shamans were doing at Karahan Tepe.
Yeah.
But once you start looking at Gnosticism and everything to do with the serpent and snake there, you start to realize that if you look in Vedic tradition, in India in particular, it's exactly the same. And there are so many crossovers between what we have in Tash Tepala at Göbekli Tepe and Karahan with Vedic religion that, you know, that's something that people have started to explore. And the more I look into it, the more I realize that there is an absolute crossover, and that there may well have been cross contact between, you know, the Indian subcontinent and the area of Anatolia as far back as 9000 BC.
Yeah. Wow. And I know that when I was at Göbekli and doing research about the soil that's buried it, some of it doesn't appear to be from that area. What about Karahan Tepe? Is that the same story with Karahan Tepe's burial?
Well, it's an interesting story, because the archaeologists had always believed that Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried. And yeah, there's absolute evidence of that. And Klaus Schmidt wrote that. But they recently have changed their mind at Göbekli Tepe, and they now reckon that it was all accidental, that the whole thing was just a big cave-in and everything's just a jumble and whatever. I think there's a bit of both. I think that parts of it were deliberately buried, and yes, of course, you know, certain areas that were created like cliff, did collapse in, of course, as that would naturally do over the hundreds of thousands of years. But at Karahan Tepe, it's much more specific, because the pillar shrine, the one that's behind you now, was very, very carefully buried in different layers of stone and earth. And some of this earth is definitely not local. I mean, to start off with, there isn't any soil around, really.
There's none.
There's quite poor soil on top of the on top of the limestone, but the soil that was used to form a layer, it was like a red earth, is not local at all. Now, if I had to say where it came from, it probably comes from the Haram Plain, which definitely is red earth. I mean, I've been there, I've looked at it, I've checked. So it probably has a symbolic value, like putting ochre on burials, something that's been done since the Neolithic, not Neolithic, the Neanderthal people, as much as probably 100,000 years ago. And it represents like the lifeblood, and basically going from this world into the next. And there's no question these people would have believed that these enclosures were alive, that they had spirit, they had consciousness, what in Greek was referred to as the genius loci, the spirit of a place. But we see that as more like a metaphor, a presence maybe in a place. No. The people anciently believed that everything had spirit, everything had consciousness, every hilltop, every rock outcrop, and clearly every shrine that they would create. So if you stopped using it, you had to decommission it and put it to rest, put the spirit to rest. And that's what I think was going on with the Pillar Shrine and the other shrines at Karahan Tepe. They deliberately buried them very carefully, almost like a funeral, if you like. And of course, we still decommission churches, mosques, synagogues, temples to this day. They have to be, rites have to be done. If they, are decommissioned, they are made secular buildings again. So there is no reason why the people at places like Karahan and Göbekli would not have done the same. Right.
Absolutely. That's amazing, because, wow, it makes a lot of sense that it's like a burial. It's like a formal burial, a ritual to say, a final good night. We are decommissioning this site. Wow, that makes a lot more sense to me now. So thank you for clarifying that. I know in the beginning we were kind of just having some talks off camera about your new project. Can you tell us about that new project you're working on, that new book you're working on?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm just about to drop what was originally going to be an article, but now I'm calling a monograph because it's actually 17,000 words
Wow.
on Stonehenge, because a lot has been going on recently there.
Hmm.
I mean, there is an incredible exotic stone there, which they call the altar stone, and it's now been confirmed that it comes from northeastern Scotland. And
Wow.
the question then becomes, what the hell was it doing at Stonehenge? Now,
Yeah.
clearly it was probably brought there by the builders, who are people called the Grooveware culture, incredibly sophisticated culture, who begin in the Orkney Islands of Scotland and gradually move down and create Stonehenge as almost like their piece de resistance, if you like, about 3000 BC. But this wasn't the only altar stone. There's evidence there was a second one. So the whole monograph is about the search to find the second one, where they were placed, what the function was of them. And of course, you can't help make comparisons with the two central pillars that you see at Tash Tepe sites like Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe. Something similar was there at Stonehenge, but during its very first earliest phase. But that's what I'm just about to drop. This is going to be completely free, by the way. I'm going to upload it probably later on today. So if anybody wants it, come on to andrewcollins.com, where you'll find details of our tours. Anyway, the next one's in May next year. We've got another one in September. We'll talk about that in a second again, because there's some important information which we have to talk about to do with Karahan Tepe and a roof, which we'll come back to. But but the Stonehenge article will drop. But I'm going to make this into a book that's also going to show that Stonehenge acted and functioned as a sonic temple, with a very specific frequency relating to the harmonic of the universe itself, and that it was actually built as a role model of the universe in its form as a dodecahedron. Something that science is now showing is actually the case, that our universe is not flat and infinite like they thought it was. It's curved and finite, and that shape is a dodecahedron, which is extraordinary stuff. So, I'm going to be doing that. Plus, I'll also obviously, answer the question of what is the relationship between Göbekli Tepe and Stonehenge. And the answer, in simple terms, is the fact that even though the relationship is only indirect, basically, if you trace back the origins of Tash Tepe and you trace back the origins of the Mesolithic peoples that create the Grooveware culture on Orkney, they can both dovetail back to exactly the same area, and that's Siberia, Mongolia. In other words, all of this begins there. And you have to start asking yourself what's going on there, and that's a whole different conversation we'll have on another day. But it essentially involves some of our ancient cousins like the Denisovans. But that's for another talk. But let's just talk about Karahan Tepe and roofs. Maybe this is you need to know this as well. I don't know if you have any more information, but they are going to be putting a roof and a glass walkway through Karahan Tepe, and the work will begin, they reckon, in September next year. So that's 2025. Now, it could be put back, but that's the date that's scheduled right now. And that basically, for all your viewers out there and listeners, if you're going to go out there, I suggest you do so before September next year. I mean, our next tour is in May. I'm not sure if you've got one before that time. I haven't. Okay. Because, if it shuts, it could shut for a year, maybe a year and a half. And I say that because that's the time frame that Göbekli Tepe was closed. I actually went to Göbekli when it was closed and they were putting the roofs on, and it was a mess. I mean, iron girders and stacks of wood and plant vehicles all over. I mean, you thought, oh my God, how the hell are they going to clean this up? But they didn't. So I just a word of warning for anybody that is interested in going there. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. And where can they find out more about your tours?
Yeah, I mean, we go twice a year. I say we, I mean, myself, Hugh Newman, and JJ Ainsworth to Turkey. We're going to Peru, Bolivia, and Easter Island next November as well. All the details of these you'll find on andrewcollins.com, which is my website, which has all the links, obviously, to my social media. Please, obviously, follow me on those. Plus, there's articles on Karahan that you can look at. And there's watchers on, there's articles on the Watchers, the Nephilim, Göbekli Tepe, astronomical alignments at all these sites, etc. And obviously the book itself, Karahan Tepe, Civilization of the Anunnaki and the Cosmic Origins of the Serpent of Eden. The publisher likes long titles because it's something to do with meta tags and things, which Billy is holding up there. Right. Obviously it's available at any good online bookstore, Amazon and Barnes and Noble, most obviously. That's it really. And I mean, it's an exciting time right now. I mean, the fact that all of these sites are being exposed right now is incredible. I mean, to me, this is as exciting as finding Tutankhamun's tomb, in 1922. I mean, what on earth will they uncover in the next 5 to 10 years? And by the way, there's been a lot of conspiracy theories about, Göbekli Tepe, and they're not leaving it for 150 years, because they're hiding secrets. They are beginning to open new areas, which they will be working on next year. They're continuing to work on the existing areas. They've been working this year on Enclosure B. Last year it was Enclosure D. And so there's a lot going on. And as far as Karahan is concerned, I mean, they can't work fast enough there. I mean, incredible new stuff is being uncovered, including a massive enclosure on the top of the hill, possibly at 100 feet across, where they found this giant statue, 7.5 feet tall, and that's sitting down. If it stood up, it'd be 9 foot. It's a true giant. To me, I think when you look on this, you're looking on the face of an Anunnaki. This is, to me, the face of an Anunnaki, one of the watchers, one of the giants of legend, one of the immortals, one of those that created the Tashtepala culture, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Wow. Andrew Collins, you're a wealth of knowledge. Okay. I've got to have you on here.
Thank you, sir.
Quite a few more times because we can talk for hours on these topics. It's all amazing.
Sure.
I'm going to link all of the information, your website, everything will be in this video as well as the audio version. And I'll send you some clips that you can put up as well, because everyone needs to hear what you have to say. I love your work, man. I'm a big fan of your work. It's incredible. And we're going to get this episode edited real nice and put it out and promote it and make sure that you start to get the recognition that you definitely deserve over here in America too. Because I know they know you over there. Well, we got to get you over here in America, and we'd love to have you come down to the Forbidden Conscious Awards coming up in August 2nd and 3rd. So leave a little window open on your schedule. We'll see if we can get you to America. I look forward to that. Great, man. Appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank Elizabeth, obviously. And I'll speak to you again.
All right. Thank you, brother.
Maybe about Stonehenge or something.
Watch this video for free at www.4bk.tv or download the app on your smartphone, Fire Stick app, Samsung TV, Roku, and other app providers.